This week on Startup Security Weekly, how to spot a bad Kickstarter inside the mind of a venture capitalist, front Series A deck. Want to become more disruptive in your startup? We got that topic too, as well as keeping hackers from destroying your startup. We'll talk about all that and more, so stay tuned. This is a Security Weekly production. Welcome, everyone, to Startup Security Weekly. I'm your host, Paul Asadorian, broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island. The beach bum himself, security leadership innovator from the Security Catalyst himself, Mr. Michael Santarcangelo. Welcome, Michael.
Welcome. No, I'm welcome. It's excited to be here.
Yes.
I'm overwhelmed with it.
It's awesome. We actually, on last night on Paul Security Weekly, we talked a lot about the topics that we talk about in this show with a slightly different audience. I think you and I both expressed interest in having those guests here on this show. So,
oh yeah,
we're working very hard to bring guests on this show, and so we're looking forward to that. So stay tuned. Yeah. We very well could have a very, very special guest on next week's show. It was almost going to be this show, but next week, make sure you tune in.
Yeah, we've got some exciting folks lined up. And again, the thing I keep liking about this is, we're looking at companies that are pre-Series A, so they've got a compelling technology. And as we learned last night, the technology is 5% of it. It's the story, it's the team, it's the passion, it's everything else. And so, if you've got that, then we want to talk to you, and we want to help other people find you and discover you. But then it's also some of the folks we're going to talk to are the ones that are supporting those, or making those, or been there, done that. Some of their stories, people that have actually just gotten or closed their A series of funding. They're going to talk about some of the decisions that they've made. So yeah, we're kind of at that point where it's really now starting to look at how are we going to help security startups get some traction and make a difference and understand and validate what they're doing. But again, this is still a program, that startup mentality, the things that we talk about in terms of the communication, the leadership, your technology, validating it, everything else. If you're in the enterprise today, you can run your group like a startup, and you're going to benefit from it. And or you can support startups and help change and influence the industry. And and we'll eventually talk to some investors too. What are they looking for in security? What are they excited about? Why? What does that look like? So yeah, I get excited every week prepping for the program, and then you and I talk about it, and we're starting to see a lot of people come back to us with ideas and thoughts, and I'm loving this. So I'm excited to see where this goes.
Me too. This month is actually our 11th year of Security Weekly, and I still feel like we're a startup in some respects, or like we've rebooted into a couple of different startups over time. So it's always exciting.
11 years, that's awesome.
Yeah. Well, each new show is like a startup, so.
Yeah.
And this one's a startup about startups. How about that?
It's very meta.
Mind blown.
Yeah. That's why we have to do it on Friday. You got to stop after you pay attention to us today.
That's it. All right, so let's talk about how to spot a bad Kickstarter.
Well, yeah, so here's why I grabbed this story. What I thought was interesting was we talked last week about crowdfunding rules and how things have shifted and changed, and the SEC lightened it up. So just a quick recap. It used to be, and it still I think might be, I got to go look at the regs exactly, but to be an SEC certified or accredited investor, you had to have a certain amount of financial liquidity or make a certain amount of money as an individual or a couple over a certain period of time. So it's like $1 million in assets and or $300,000 a year as a married couple, and then you could get your investor status. And people said, post-recession, that's no way to do it. And they point to things. They said, look, you've got Kickstarter and you've got all these other smaller ways to do it. We should go look at more of a crowdsourced model. That's going to really spur startups. Instead of waiting for people to have all this money, you can take smaller chunks of money and that'll work out for everybody. So then after the law took effect, or the changes took effect in July, one of the recent things we pointed out, or one of the articles from July said, yeah, that hasn't done anything yet. Nobody's taken advantage of it. What's up with that? And so you and I talked about that. And does it fit? Does it fit the model? Does it work? And where to go with it? And of course, right on the heels of that, I came up with this one. So the site that I pulled this off of is called Wirecutter. And if you're not following them, the Wirecutters, I think that they do an absolutely phenomenal job of covering the technology space, usually commercial, or rather consumer. But like, if I need a review on something, this is pretty much where I go. And so, of course, they came up and they said, hey, we don't cover crowdfunding, and here's why. And I was like, well, that's interesting. Let me go look at it. And they pointed out a bunch of stuff to this, and I went, oh, this is all useful if you're a startup and if you're looking at a startup. And so even though the headline is a little bit misleading, what I kind of thought looking at this was, it was talking about that crowdfunding isn't shopping. So what they're saying is,
I like that.
Well, I thought that was really interesting. Now, I've only done, how many, have you backed any Kickstarters?
I think I backed some of the charity kind of ones, but I had not an actual product.
I have backed 3, maybe 4. I'm trying to think of it. Mm-hmm. And in every case, it's worked out for me. In every case, I got the product, and for the most part was happy with it. But then when I follow it, one of the companies went on to do other great stuff. One of the companies, actually, I was really impressed. They kept in touch with us. It was for a pair of shoes. And they were like, yeah, so we don't know what the hell we were doing. And it was a big mistake, and we've learned. And, gosh, I'm sorry. But they made good. Like, I got the pair of shoes. I'm happy with them. Right. Like, I'm good with it. It all worked out. One of the other ones, it actually was great. There were a bunch of delays. But I was really happy in the end with the stuff that they did. And I would say I've spent anywhere from like $15 to $300 on it. So yeah. I guess everybody decides whether that's a lot or a little bit of money. But what I thought was just kind of interesting is it isn't shopping. Because what you're saying is, I hope that you're going to do this. I like that concept. So I'm going to throw some money at it. And I hope in return I get whatever it is that you're offering to me. Mm-hmm. And they went on to explain all of the, frankly, failed Kickstarters and things that didn't work out. But what's interesting is they point out there's a lot of delays. Manufacturing's hard. You don't get the right supplies. Yeah, I think basically every single Kickstarter I've backed, I'm running it through my head real quick, has had a delay, has had a material defect, has made it right, but went through a lot of problems. One of them went through huge problems shipping. And so I thought that was kind of interesting. And then when I started applying to it, I started looking at some of these other things. So it said, like, it feels like the first time, looks can and will deceive.
Now I can't get that song out of my head. Thank you.
It happened to me too. So we had to share that with everybody. It's too good to be true. I mean, like, I read that one and I went, we have been talking about vaporware in the security industry for 20 plus years. That's not a new concept. It looks really good, but are you able to do it? And the other thing too that I started looking at this, the last one, it doesn't exist, and there's a good reason for that. That's something we haven't talked about here, but we kind of brought up last night. A lot of people have the idea. And sometimes I'm a little flippant, and I'm like, oh, and your cat gave you the idea. But I'll be candid. I was on a call a number of years ago where that's exactly what somebody said. They had an idea for a business because their cat gave them the idea. And it was like, I don't know. I don't know what to say to that. But there are some things that should belong. Like if nobody else is doing your idea, then you're either way ahead of the curve, and that should be a warning sign.
Or like the article says, there's a really good reason or multiple reasons why that product doesn't exist, because no one wants it.
It's exactly right. It's because it wouldn't be a show if we didn't mention Shark Tank. You go on Shark Tank and they go, well, what's the problem you solve? And you're like, I don't know, but there's 8 billion people in the world, and everyone's no, stop. Just
you're
stop.
Done.
So here's what I thought, though. Looking at this, if you're on that startup side, I get it when you're excited and you're trying to make a difference. And so you've got your pretty prototype and it's all figured out. And I'm going to do this and this and this, and we're going to solve these problems. And that's how it works. Right.
I hope there's resources for people that have physical product ideas. And I think specific to security, I've seen my fair share. And I've also seen my fair share that have gone either way. Either they were able to deal with the manufacturing and shipping and supply chain issues, or they weren't, or somewhere in the middle, there were some huge delays. And in security, I've seen a lot of those different projects. And I hope that we can come to a point where if someone in security has a great idea, maybe they've got a prototype, that there are some guidelines or people that can help them use the crowdsource funding to bring their idea to market if it is in fact a good idea. And I understand the crowds. It's in between bootstrapping and taking funding. And I get that. And with a hardware product, I think it's a pretty cool idea. But I feel like if I were to do it, I understand the different hardware platforms, some of them anyway, get a pretty good understanding of them. I have no idea how I would go out and do what Darren at Hack 5 does, or Michael Osman's had some projects, and some of my other friends that deal in hardware. They're going sourcing the boards and getting designs and shipping from China, and I think Larry's even done some of it for various projects. I have no idea about that. So right. if I were to learn about that, where would I go? Would I go ask people in the community? Certainly, but are there resources for people to help them understand the challenges and wade those waters?
Well, yeah, and so what you're pointing at too is the other thing that this evoked in me when I was reading it, which is how do you evaluate? And so whether it's how do I evaluate the person or how do I evaluate the team? So now I realized I have a problem. Okay, do I have the language to describe the challenge that I'm facing, and can I get to somebody that's qualified to help me with it? And I'll tell you, I recently went through a scenario where we went through what I thought was a pretty impressive interview process to hire for a position. And I want to leave it that obtuse. And we ran everybody through the first round of interviews, and we kind of compared notes, and we thought about it. And we tried to look to it at capabilities and objective criteria. So basically, we thought we were being smart about it. And then we gave everybody 3 weeks off, and then we went through the same round of interviews again, and asked insightful questions like, what's changed, and what do you think now, and if you've had time to reflect on it, what do you think is different? What I've realized now that we've made the choice is that there's a distinction between the person who appears to fit and the person who's able to do the work. And I'm going to broaden the lens out a little bit. I've started to notice there's a lot of situations in security and outside of security as well, where there are people who they have an actual aversion to work, and there's people who have an inability to do the work. And sometimes it's in the same package, and that's disastrous. But understanding, right, it's asking the question, but being able to understand if the answer you got was accurate or not are two different skill sets. And this comes into play, right? So when you're a startup, are you hiring the right people for your organization? Are you hiring the right salespeople? Are you embracing the right stuff in marketing? When you're on the other side of the coin and I'm that buyer, I'm that target market, that client, how am I evaluating if they're doing it right or not? And if they're making good choices or not? And I think that creates some friction that slows us down. So when you talk about how do we start to solve that in the marketplace, I think that's one of the things that I hope we can try to help with. But that's where feedback-wise, how are you guys in the enterprise handling this today? Those of you in startups, how are you handling it today? Maybe there's something that we don't know about yet. I'd love to hear about it. Or tell us what you think. Because what I noticed was looking at Kickstarter felt like a pretty interesting microcosm to the startup community. And I just wanted to kick it around a little bit.
I have ADD, as most people know. While I was reading this article, Michael, there was one on the left that said how to cut the cord and what to do if you can't in terms of your cable TV provider. And it quoted an interesting statistic and said, in a recent report claims that more people quit paying for TV service in the second quarter of 2016 than in any previous quarter. There's a great company, Michael, that I think kind of relates to the show. They're not a startup. They actually started in 2007. The company's called Silicon Dust, and they make a product called HD Home Run. Among other products, they seem to be diversified a little bit. But essentially, you can hook an antenna to it, and it'll stream those channels onto your network. And they also make one that if you're not quite ready to cut the cord, like myself, I still want to keep the cable service. They make one that connects to the cable, has a cable card, and sends out streams and allows me to watch it pretty much anywhere in my house with the right technology. I think that's awesome. And their tagline right in the beginning of their website, stop overpaying for TV, right? They've identified the problem very clearly, and then they talk about their solution.
And now you have it, you've tried it?
I have it. I really like it. a lot.
Was it a low risk decision to try it based on price or guarantee or like? So think about all the stuff we just talked about.
Right.
How did you cross that list off with them to say, this is pretty safe for me, I don't have to feel bad about it?
So I read the reviews on it and read about different customer experiences. And don't read both the good and bad and then make the decision on your own. Because I read some of the bad reviews and I can kind of tell, I've been around technology long enough to know that like that person has no idea what they're doing. That's not the company's fault. Like they're just like, problem is between the chair and the keyboard, right? And so it was $129, something like that. So it wasn't terribly expensive. But I looked at my return on investment, even if I can get rid of TiVo service, which I was paying for, and I can get rid of my cable boxes, that was enough savings per month that in less than a year I can recoup my investment. I was like, we've talked about this exact same thing on the show, right? So for me, I'm like, well, this is awesome. Now, I'm more tech savvy than a lot of people, especially when it comes to my home and the things in my house related to technology.
Yeah, you're an early adopter, no question about it.
So I can take advantage of this service, I think, better because of my technology background. Like you build Linux boxes to watch TV. Like I can handle that, right? That's what I do for a living. So it'd be interesting how it's going to creep into the mass market. For example, there's no app on Roku to watch this because Roku's a closed platform. So that would be one strategic partnership I would recommend for Silicon Dust, and I'm sure they've had that conversation too. So that was interesting. It kind of hit on a lot of things we talk about on the show, Michael. Again, they're not a startup, but I think they solve a problem that a lot of people have, and they do it well and kind of give you some insight into my purchasing decisions. So.
No, but see, this is what I like about that too, is because I've had the similar thing, right? So we used to travel by RV, and then we've had periods where I tried cord cutting, but I actually tried it more not to save money or deal with anything. It was much more of a, gosh, I don't like everybody sitting on the TV.
It's a lifestyle thing. Yeah, I get it.
But so let me turn it off and stop paying for like crap I don't need, which just encourages people to watch it. And then what we found, frankly, was I like football. And in Myrtle Beach, there's not enough over-the-air channels where I can really fix that. So, I mean, I actually watched a fair amount of football, but not as much as I wanted, blah, blah, blah. So I've started looking again at it, and it kind of depends on where you live. So this is interesting because now that you said it, I'm going to go check it out. And knowing that you've done it makes it a little bit easier for me.
I can't tell you on the air, but I'll tell you off air how to solve your problem.
I appreciate that. So
it's not necessarily above board, but there is a way to solve your problem.
I always like solving problems, but and I think what we're pointing out here too is that when you can get somebody to talk about your product, when you can get somebody to explain, yes, I had that problem and it connected with me, and yes, it had these guarantees and it made this case, and the logic made sense to me, the numbers made sense to me. Yeah, I went ahead and tried it. That's great, and I think you also pointed out too, they're going to have to make that connection from who's that early adopter to where it goes. You know, I've loved the fact you and I've been talking a lot lately, and we talked about it last night. You need those first customers. In fact, that's going to be one of the stories we talk about. You need those first customers. You need to treat them right. You need to respect them and stick with them. But then their feedback might be really slanted toward their particular needs. And at some point, you got to figure out, but do more than one people, is that a broader range, and is that the direction I go? If so, you run that direction. And if not, you figure out how to maybe help them work with that or not. I think that's interesting. So,
well, like it's interesting, like how convenience solves problems that you didn't necessarily know that you had until you start playing with the product. I see this a lot in security too. Like we sell the product as we solve the problem, and then once the customer gets it, they notice and start experiencing other conveniences that help kind of shape their future behaviors and problem solving. So in the HD Home Run example, if it's an Android tablet, I can put a free app on the Android tablet and I can watch TV. Now, if I told you that that was the selling point, you'd be like, yeah, I don't really need to do that. But once you get it in your house and you get it on your Android tablet, you're like, wow, that's really cool. Like my son, like we want to watch, we watch like Shark Tank and The Voice and football, right? So like if those things are on TV, and my son really wants to watch another show that's on, like I can give him a tablet and he's watching TV and he's really happy. and he's leaving us alone while we're trying to watch our show, like right before bed, right? So then I'm like, wow, I would have never like put all those pieces together necessarily until we had this solution. And I think in security, we see a lot of the same things. Yeah, we buy a product that solves a problem, but hey, it lets us look at the data this way, and then we can share it. And that's really convenient in our. So it helps our process.
Here's what I love about that is that what you're describing are the benefits over the features. Right? We keep talking about this, and I have to be. I heard somebody say last night. I think it was Josh talking about. That's a challenge for a lot of people. And then I've been reflecting on it. That was a challenge for me for a long time. Like, what's the difference between a benefit and a feature? Yes. And the feature is a lot of times what in technology and security specifically we get ramped
hung up on. You can watch TV on all your Android tablets. That's the feature.
Exactly.
And we're excited about that. That's exciting to us, right?
Yeah, because we figured out technology-wise how I could do that, and I could stream to 2 different devices, and they don't have latency or whatever exciting thing we figured out. We overcame the jitter factor, and look at what we were able to do. But people, unless they're like us and they're bent that particular way, they don't care. That's not exciting. Mm-hmm. But when you get to say, well, have you had the situation where, and it's usually like solve a problem, reach an aspiration. Your child is unhappy. I had a meltdown last night, actually, because I wanted to watch the football game. Mm-hmm. And my 2-year-old decided, no football. Now, normally on Saturday or Sunday, well, college or pro, she's sitting right next to me. We're watching football. She's digging it. Last night, no and football. It turns out she wanted to watch Shrek. Yeah. That's what
she wants. And she won't go to another room and do that.
No.
They have to be in the same room as mommy and dad. Yes. Did you have this problem too? Michael has 4 kids. I have 3 kids. Yes. So we should just hang out and have them all create chaos together. But but I find that the kids want to be in the same room as you, which I would say the majority of the time is totally okay until you reach a point, Michael, you know this point very well, where you're just like, hey, for a couple hours, kids, like go in the other room, watch TV, go play, go outside, ride a bike, go experience life without me for a couple hours, please.
And you'll be okay.
You'll be fine.
I grew up and did it. Yeah, but then I also look at it and I go, if I leave 4 of them unattended to their own devices,
there's consequences for that.
Yeah, how's that going to work out? So there's a balancing act to it. But the point is, you can help somebody solve their problem and reach an aspiration at the same time. You've got somebody dependent on you who is hell-bent on not doing whatever you want to do and needs a solution. Boom, here, I can put that in front of them, which lets you watch the show you wanted to watch. And so what I keep looking at is being able to tell that story and to bring that together. Those are the important things. So let's go back to it then. Whether you're crowdfunding, you're trying to get your first sales or whatever else, those things matter. So you can look at it and go, well, I'm never going to be on Kickstarter. Good. You don't need to be. Mm-hmm. But if you can go learn from what's happening in those experiences and look at the ones that work, and then go look at it. Almost everybody's having a problem with supply chain. Okay. How have you thought that through? How are you going to overcome that? And then when you can address that for us as buyers or as evaluators, you're way ahead of the game. In fact, let's talk about venture capitalists.
Yeah, so, I was going to say, I wanted to transition into the story because it hits on, so I'll read you my quote. I like to think that I came up with this one all on my own. It probably is borrowed and someone else probably said it before. But I state that knowledge alone is no substitute for wisdom, common sense, or enthusiasm. We talked about this a little bit last night too.
Yep.
And this is just like one of my life, career, business observations. And I think it ties to pretty tightly the article you have in here about what a venture capitalist is looking for. And it sounds like enthusiasm is pretty high up on the list. Now,
yeah, and I wanted to shade that a little bit, not throw shade on it, but shade it a little bit because I think what's neat. So this guy in particular says, here's what I like. I invest in entrepreneurs who have this infectious enthusiasm, and of course quotes Elon Musk and says, "Look, this is a guy. I want this guy." So I want to go back to it a little bit because we're around passionate people a lot. We're around enthusiastic people a lot. There's an understated part to this. Yes, you need the enthusiasm, but you need to create for me that vision, and it can't just be solve the problem. You've got to give me what you hear me call the better tomorrow. And the reason I do that is because I don't want a vision statement. Vision statements are supposed to be forward-reaching. When we do all this great stuff in the future, the world is going to change and we're going to be part of it. And it's good. I love that. But what I'm looking for is what's going to change the world tomorrow. And tomorrow could be next 2 to 3 years if you needed to. And why is that exciting? And that's where that infectious enthusiasm, where that passion comes in, because that's the person that, as long as that vision doesn't seem completely far-fetched and or they've got a track record, then you want to be part of that.
Yeah.
And
I like your combination of enthusiasm and vision. I think that's a winning combination for me, not just if I'm going to invest in your company, but if I'm going to have you on my team in any capacity, employee or a team, in whatever team in general. Like, those two things are pretty high on my list. I like that. I like those.
Now, think about it from a VC's perspective too. Do you think Elon Musk has any problem getting qualified people to come work with him?
Probably not.
I would say zero chance of that. And by the way, he told people he can send a rocket up and come back and land it, and he has. He's had some spectacular public failures, but those are just learning experiences, and he's happy to do that. Man, his vision between Hyperloop and SpaceX and everything else. He's revolutionizing.
Reminds me of one of my other quotes. One of my other favorite quotes, right? Success is going from failure to failure without loss of enthusiasm.
Yeah, and that's the point.
Winston Churchill.
Yeah, and it's a pretty solid one. So I thought that was interesting. Just because, when I've talked to the VCs, one of the things that they keep telling me is, I'm interested in the team. And I think that's interesting too, because they say, I'm interested in the team. So they're going to either look that there's a leader or there's a co-founder or there's a team. And so if you're in that startup situation or you're a leader in an organization, what does your enthusiasm look like? Or do you have a defeatist mindset, or is your mindset positive? Are you looking at, here's the stuff we can do. Yes, there's going to be some setbacks, but here's what we're going to do. We're going to get through it. We're going to power through it. And this is why. This is what we're going to get as a result. That's really exciting. So if you're a VC and you're going to give somebody your money, you've got some level of confidence that that person and that team is going to relentlessly pursue against that. Let's go back to Shark Tank. How often do they say, how much of your own money do you have in this program? And the person says, well, none. And they say, okay, is this your full-time job? No. Wait, okay. So you have none of your own money in this. This is not your full-time job, but you're asking me to put my money in it?
Yeah.
Why? Why would I do that?
That's a problem.
Nuts. And so I thought that was interesting here. Now, I'm going to add something else into this. I've been talking to a lot of startups lately that are pursuing their A series, and they're working through their A series. And I started to realize something that's kind of interesting. And maybe obvious, but I'm going to state it anyway. Venture capital continues to change. So we'll see that there are really big firms, and we'll see that there are specialties. I know in the state of South Carolina, we got a lot of different angel groups, and they're figuring out how to come together and work on stuff. Now, there's some fundamentals that we'll keep talking about, right? They want to see a pitch. They want to see a plan. They want to understand what your product is and how you're going to earn 10 times the investment back in a 5-year period, right? Those tend to be pretty standard. But one of the other things you start looking at too is when they say, what do venture capitalists want? Some venture capitalists haven't had an exit yet. They haven't had an IPO yet. They haven't taken somebody to the 10 times growth yet. And so what's interesting is sometimes what they're looking for is that infectious enthusiasm with the product and plan that's properly placed and going to take off. And so I just think it's interesting because when we say, like, what are they looking for? Sometimes what they're looking for too is a more simple problem to solve. They're not worried about a hot sector. They're not worried about something else. They haven't yet had the exit, and they need, right? Think about that. If you're a venture capitalist, you're still raising funds. How are you going to show that you're successful as a venture capitalist? So if you're on that startup side, it's not just, hey, look at me, I'm really cool. Could you give me some money? Also keep in mind, hey, I'm really cool, and how am I going to help you solve some of the problems that you have? I think it's just something to keep in mind.
I think at this point, we're going to take a short break, Michael, and come back and probably just round out our stories since we have so many stories to talk about this week. We'll do that. So stay tuned. We'll be right back.
I like it.